Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Filippo Marino, and today we're going to talk about the impact of artificial intelligence on current travel risk intelligence products and practices, drawing from the lessons we learned in developing Safe-xplore AI and our industry experience. Well, about 30 or 35 years ago, I started my career in the risk mitigation industry. And back then, my most common job was developing travel itinerary risk assessments for corporate CEOs and their entourage. In the 3 decades since, I must have produced, commissioned, or seen thousands of these risk briefs and trained dozens of analysts on how to do it. As of January of this year, we completed the development of an AI-generated travel risk brief to enrich and expand our proprietary data and ratings, and tested it with industry insiders, including several protective intelligence professionals. Even in its first release, the AI-generated product matched and outperformed that of an analyst working anywhere between 4 and 8 hours, with or without access to commercial intelligence products. So it's a good time to draw and share some lessons from these efforts and what is the first enterprise class TRI platform to rely nearly exclusively on this extremely new and fast moving technology. We'll start by defining some of the travel risk intelligence objectives and quality metrics. We'll look at legacy practices and some of the known shortfalls. We'll then look at how AI applies to each step of the traditional intelligence cycle. And we'll also dive deeper into how Safe-xplore does it, how we did it. Hopefully we'll draw some critical lessons and have time to discuss those. So let's get to it. Many of you here today know that the most prevalent risk intelligence product in the world by volume is arguably the travel destination risk analysis, or brief, consumed daily internationally by tens of thousands of individuals, albeit with varying degrees of quality and value. At one end of the spectrum, you have casual travelers Googling how safe is Cancun and relying on personal anecdotes and stories from Facebook, travel blogs, such as "My cousin got mugged at gunpoint last month," or "I go to Cancun for spring break every year and never had an issue," all of which may be genuine, but not necessarily valuable for making informed decisions about travel risks. On the other end of the spectrum, we might have dedicated protective intelligence analysts conducting multi-day digital advances, as they're often referred to in the executive protection world, with EP agents scouting routes and locations ahead of the protectee's arrival. Regardless of their level of sophistication, the goals and objectives are the same: to estimate the destination risks for the traveler in terms of crime, accidents, and health, and to identify critical information that can shape the decisions and behaviors to reduce the likelihood of incidents and respond effectively if they occur. AI has the potential to revolutionize how these goals are achieved. Over the past 20 or 30 years, these travel risk briefs have developed a general standard for content and format. They typically include a destination rating or score, which is the closest thing to, or a proxy for, the statistical base rate estimates that we would ideally have available to us. A narrative or contextual summary, significant facts such as critical phone numbers, location of hospitals and embassies, recent events such as natural disasters or social unrest. General consumers can also access official sources and government websites like the US Department of State, the British Foreign Commonwealth Office, or their Canadian and Australian equivalents. Large and multinational organizations often subscribe to commercial vendors who provide similar services or specialized in more narrow features or vertical applications. To determine whether AI can augment, improve, or completely replace legacy risk intelligence products and practices, we need to first define the quality metrics used to evaluate these efforts. In other words, what makes one risk intelligence brief better than another? And how do we measure its accuracy, quality, or effectiveness? And second, establish the current benchmark and standard of practice against which we can compare AI-generated products. Is AI-powered travel risk intelligence better or worse than the average product? Or is it equal or superior to the best products available today? And here, it's crucial to recognize that one of the biggest fallacies in the current AI risks versus benefits debate is using total accuracy or absence of errors as the benchmark, when in fact the benchmark should be the current or human level of accuracy and quality. So let's start by measuring the value of an intelligence product, like a travel risk brief. Here, the elephant in the room in the intelligence world is this: ambiguity. It's not only the curse affecting most intelligence programs and products, but it's also the primary tool that analysts use to exploit the risk innumeracy and intelligence naivete of corporate executives and information consumers. Ambiguity allows them to get away with analyses and products that offer little, if any, decision support value, accountability, or economic ROI. In reality, see, the value of intelligence is not that difficult to measure. It is the amount of uncertainty reduction in decisions with economic consequences. In human behavior, the information value is equal to the difference in the value of behaviors. For example, ahead of a business trip to a city and country I've never visited before in my life, I might and should have a high degree of uncertainty about the risks I could face. Now, I receive clear information that this location presents a substantially higher risk of street and petty crimes than most of the world's top travel destinations, or maybe higher than my own home city. As a result, I modify what I wear and carry with me, how I carry my wallet or purse, leave any jewelry at home, and keep a high level of awareness against street cons and scams. Or I might learn that the destination is experiencing an increase in malaria cases. So I begin a prophylactic drug regime, change my wardrobe choices, and consistently apply mosquito repellent. Now, in the spirit of disambiguation, let's clarify what travel risks are. And it turns out these are very much the same as personal risks as defined in protective security operations. They're best categorized into these 5 buckets of physical attacks and crimes, accidents and emergencies, such as motor vehicle accidents and medical emergencies. Inappropriate conduct is a generic bucket for all uncomfortable, inappropriate human encounters below the threshold of violence, if you will. And then information or economic losses, and of course, transfer disruptions. The risk ratings and intelligence we should expect pertain to the probability and nature of these phenomena. In order to calibrate our intuition or pre-existing base rates to something less wrong or less uncertain. Everything else is generally either noise or window dressing. Now, despite arguments to the contrary, typically based on the persistent myth about the power of our gut instincts, most people have terrible base rates and intuitions about personal risks and how dangerous travel destinations can be. Here you have an example of respondents' estimates of homicide risks for well-known cities from our own 2020 Personal Risk Judgment Survey. The red dots represent executive protection and travel risk professionals, while blue dots are estimates from the general public. And you can see there's barely a difference between the two. Without going into details here about this survey, you see the shotgun pattern typical of high uncertainty domains, where most people can't even tell if a destination is half as dangerous or 5 times as dangerous as another. And severe bias, where foreign is often weighted with riskier and familiar with safer. Why does this matter so much? This matters because we know that any given or intuitive rating of a destination's relative risk act as a cognitive anchor and are highly influential and predictive of the self-protective behaviors that the traveler will adopt while visiting the destination. So allow me to pause here for a second to emphasize this absolutely critical point in the field of risk judgment and decision making. that the most prevalent and impactful cognitive fallacy is arguably the base rate fallacy, also known as the base rate neglect. In a nutshell, this occurs when we favor anecdotes and recent or salient information over relevant statistics. As you know, there are no risk rating regulatory organizations or travel risk scales police to contain the spread of nonsense risk data. Beyond the world of health and disease classification, measurement, and rating, which are actually very well organized and maintained internationally, personal risk data in crime and violence categories are a complete jungle, which is why we devoted well over 3 years of our company's effort to address this issue and ultimately released the first and only index of violent crime risks for global cities that we know of and made it available for free last year as a public service. So, back to the value question. Travel risk intelligence should be measured and evaluated in terms of: does it accurately and effectively convey the destination risks? Does it influence and facilitate behaviors in ways that reduce the likelihood and impact of incidents? For this to occur, the intelligence must be unambiguous, telling travelers that there are medium-high travel risk is utterly worthless. What is travel risk and what's medium-high? It must be also relevant and sufficiently granular to avoid the flow of averages. Being told that the visited country just raised its terrorism threat rating from yellow to orange, or that a certain politician was assassinated last week, has no measurable value. It should also include, of course, critical information that can be used in case of an incident or emergency, such as the local 911 equivalent or the name and location of recommended hospitals, but not too much, as we know travelers won't read it. Now on to the benchmarking and standard of current product and practices. I've spent the last years educating analysts and consumers about the many fallacies and errors that compromise the value of today's travel risk intelligence products. These products were largely designed and developed in the 1980s and 1990s before the internet and our big data world, and they've never been meaningfully modernized. Now, the problems include, but are not limited to, extremely ambiguous risk definitions that combine personal risks with property risks or political stability, making them virtually worthless from a predictive value standpoint. Then there's the infamous practice of rating entire countries or generalizing travelers using geographic or demographic averages. For example, giving Brazil a single risk rating while ignoring the differences in traveling to Sao Paulo or Rio de Janeiro, or leading you to believe that a 24-year-old male has the same risk profile as a 65-year-old female traveler. Then the use of arbitrary ordinal scale, which is extremely common, like 1 to 5, falsely presented as quantitative, while having little more value than a Google Maps restaurant rating or an Amazon product review. And of course, the absurd vacuum of domestic risk intelligence for US travelers that incidentally represent not only their most frequent travel destinations, but also present the highest violent crime risks of virtually all high-income nations. Let's consider one example from during most of the Donald Trump presidency, when the US State Department rated El Salvador in the same risk category as Italy, a level 2. And now imagine a family considering both Rome and San Salvador for a trip to visit relatives or offer their children a great travel experience. This rating suggests that the two destinations present similar risks, potentially leaving the decision to other factors like cost or the weather. The crucial question is, what is the value of this information in terms of uncertainty reduction and decision quality for this family? In reality, during those years, El Salvador experienced some of the highest per capita murder and violent crime rates in the world. More accurately, it presented a minimum of 3 times the risk of violent crime victimization, such as rape, robbery, and aggravated assault, and about 60 times the risk of being murdered compared to Italy. We must remember that risk information platforms and ratings can have extremely diverse objectives and criteria. And one rating methodology can have real decision-making value for one set of stakeholders while being dangerous for another. So the next time you hear someone complain about the LLM's propensity for hallucinations, just ask them if their definition extends to cases such as this. So how common is this misleading risk categorization? Unfortunately, it's everywhere. I've been speaking to protective and travel risk intelligence professionals every week for years now. And I can assure you that very few of them have the training and competencies to distinguish a legitimate and credible risk rating from a completely useless one. And they primarily rely on social proof for their product evaluation. The largest travel risk management solution vendors, catering to most Fortune 500 corporations, continue to rely on these practices. Many of them place, for example, the United States in the same travel risk class as most Western Europe and even Austria, for example. Now, one wonders again, what is the intelligence value of this map for, say, a 23-year-old male from Vienna visiting Atlanta, Georgia, where, according to our own Safe-xplore data and calculation, his risks of becoming the victim of a serious violent crime is 24 to 38 times that of his home city. And some actually suggest or believe that pushing this information ahead of a business trip will reduce an employer's duty of care liability risks, which we can easily argue against. These ratings continue to survive today under the false presumption that they're better than no rating at all. However, the reality is that these misleading ratings can actually increase the likelihood of incidents by providing travelers with a false sense of security or confidence. When travelers are given inaccurate or ambiguous information, they may make decisions and engage in behaviors that are less cautious or self-protective than they would have if they had maintained a high degree of uncertainty, completely defeating the purpose of providing travel risk intelligence in the first place. Now we've established how to measure the intelligence value and highlighted current practices' shortcomings. We can finally address how the intelligence cycle that guides most analytical efforts might benefit from the AI revolution. There are, of course, numerous types, contexts, and requirements for intelligence analysis. Today, to be clear, we're focusing on the narrow and specialized product called travel risk intelligence. However, it's important to note that most intelligence products aim to reduce the complexity and uncertainty of the world and improve the quality of decisions. In other words, to extract some signal from the noise, to use a term of art. The AI benefits and opportunities we'll talk about here today apply to a wide range of intelligence products beyond the travel risk management and protective operations. So let's begin with the collection and processing steps of the intelligence cycle. Aside from the obvious challenge of source quality and credibility, these steps nearly always struggle with information volume, speed, and format. This is especially true in a world where open source data and information make up the bulk of the material. It shouldn't come as a surprise that AI can vastly outperform humans in this regard, as humans simply can't keep up with the flood of information generated every second around the world. And here are a few instances where large language models are playing groundbreaking roles. Google's GDELT project, to name one, in collaboration with the Internet Archive, recently transcribed the entire first decade of the television news archive, totaling more than 19 million minutes of airtime. With the power of LLMs, we can now transition from simple data labeling and metadata indexing to semantic language processing, which, to use an analogy, is like finally having access to the submerged portion of an iceberg. The difference between legacy word or tag matching and context-aware collection and processing is game-changing. For example, you'd be surprised to learn how many people online claim to want to murder somebody at McDonald's for getting cold fries, or think that the McMuffin is debombed. Our current technology is unable to distinguish these from real threats. But with AI, we'll be able to do so at an unprecedented speed and scale. One of the more promising new generative AI trends is the emergence of multimodal agentic applications that allow us to create autonomous ad hoc AI agents that can locate and monitor all forms of information like text, video, and audio sources in virtually any language, transcribe, rate, and classify the content for further analysis, and even generate custom code to access and scrape new information sources as needed. One such case could be specialized agents virtually navigating geographic information mapping and open source imagery data, as was the case in this image showing the result of AI autonomous travel agents that use Google Maps, Google Earth, and Street View to analyze images, detect specific objects like fire hydrants, benches, and trash bins, generate heat maps of that data without any human intervention. Now, on the analysis and production side, the attention capacity of an analyst or group of analysts is a fundamental challenge. The average human is thought to be able to hold anywhere between 3 and 7 concurrent ideas at any given point and recall only so much to active memory. For simplicity, we can reasonably compare human active memory to the context windows of LLMs. I don't know about you, I struggle to complete a full foreign affairs article in one session these days. And every young analyst I meet now consumes most of their news and information in chunks of 240 characters or so. Just a couple of weeks ago, Google released Gemini Pro 1.5. 1 million token window, which roughly translates to over 700,000 words, about 1 hour of video, 11 hours of audio, and a code base of approximately 30,000 lines of code. This would require between 30 and 50 hours for the average human to read, let alone memorize or process. There are several research projects that are experimenting with 4 and 10 million token windows, and we can expect them to be available in a matter of months. And this is all before considering real-time search and retrieval augmented generation to access live data proprietary content repository, terabytes of data within seconds. Now, returning to the topic of autonomous multimodal agents, we can already create custom AI agents with specific roles, competencies, and knowledge domains to perform specialized research assignments, develop scenarios, critique the work of human analysts and other AI agents, and synthesize or discretize large bodies of text or complex images. On the reasoning front, by the way, current research on large language models has shown promising results in their capabilities for inductive, deductive, and abductive reasoning. GPT-4 has demonstrated actual performance in property induction tasks and has shown some reliability in generating and selecting hypotheses in complex fields like medical diagnostics, criminology, and homology. However, it's important to note that as of now, LLMs still struggle with complex logical reasoning and most generalizations beyond their training data. What is clear is the huge potential of LLMs as reasoning and insights companions or co-pilots. This illustration, by the way, shows a knowledge graph tool that can help analysts identify semantic clusters, specialized ontologies, and in simpler terms, highlight both existing and missing links between concepts and ideas in proprietary data, documents, or even in simple Google searches. These tools can even highlight biases and false assumptions in arguments and analyses, ultimately amplifying the intellectual capabilities of an intelligence analyst. Remarkably, these tools are already available at relatively low cost. Now on to the dissemination portion of the intelligence cycle. The generative AI language production, customization, and personalization capabilities really show their immense value and power in the dissemination stage of the intelligence cycle. It's well known that intelligence products need to be tailored to specific consumer preferences and requirements. Many have heard stories about how the US president's daily intelligence brief have been styled and formatted over the years to match the different information consumption habits or reading preferences and, frankly, the intellectual competencies of various presidents. In everyday applications, you can see how a 10-page supply chain vulnerability analysis must be repackaged for a warehouse supervisor or the affected airport's fixed-based operator. Even in its current state of maturity, ChatGPT and other models can do a fantastic job of transforming this content into as many formats as we wish and disseminate them autonomously. This could include adopting a specialized vocabulary or even proprietary and formal taxonomies for a specific industry, generating related multimedia content like maps and charts, creating chat-based interactions with individual recipients and consumers of the intelligence product to allow for deeper, more nuanced knowledge transfer. By leveraging the power of AI and LLMs, intelligence products can effectively be tailored and disseminated to meet the specific needs and preferences of each consumer, ultimately enhancing the impact and value of the intelligence product being provided. So earlier on, I claimed that our AI-generated travel risk brief could match or outperform that of an analyst working anywhere between 4 and 8 hours, with or without access to top-tier travel risk management products. So how does it do that? First, thanks to the classical AI known as machine learning, we can model city-level data for hundreds of cities and overcome the geographic flaw of averages, drawing the analysis from a country level to the city level. We can then estimate very specific risk classes, again going back to the concept of discretizing, personalizing the ratings based on the traveler demographic profile, like age and gender, and present the destination risk in relative terms to their home city, which is the most powerful way to communicate risk in order to promote self-protective behaviors. The AI also helps us reduce language ambiguity, minimizing vague and unhelpful words and phrases. And we basically replicate the work of a human analyst, leveraging the LLM's ability to synthesize very large amounts of open and selected information sources in multiple languages. We then use the tool to moderate the frequent Western bias or US-centric views that become apparent even with this simple step. And the AI agents return the results in our preferred format so that we can produce a standard style report with specific sections, bullet lists, numbers formatting, and geodata coordinates that are then turned into a map, all in real time. So we can do all of this while reducing the entire life cycle to seconds or minutes. We no longer use or need country or city templates, as each report is generated at the time of the query. The entire process takes us now about 15 to 25 minutes, but we can already see how this can be significantly reduced and most likely brought down to a couple of minutes within the next few months, measurably improving the quality of the average human output and also reducing error and bias. All of this for pennies on the dollar, removing the last traditional barrier to entry for the average consumer or small and mid-sized organizations, which is cost. I'd like to preferably stop now and leave enough time for some questions from the audience, as we've covered a lot in a very compressed format. But before we do, and very briefly, allow me to share what we found to be some of the most significant challenges in leveraging current AI products in the specific context and application. These will sound familiar to any of you who have been experimenting with or deploying custom AI applications in the past few months. So top of the list is, without question, the variability of the generative sequence and output. You see, the stochastic approach that makes these models and applications so incredibly powerful and interesting is also their downside if and where creativity is not exactly a desired characteristic. Another challenge, of course, pertains to hallucinations, which are probably the most talked about concern. And they can indeed be a real challenge, but there are several strategies to mitigate this risk that go hand in hand with those aimed at increasing the consistency and predictability of the output. Lastly, one cannot address the AI applications development challenges without talking about the crazy rate of change and innovation. You often hear developers talk about remember the early days of AI while referring to last May, which creates a real competency gap. We're basically all learning as we go and learning constantly just to keep up. This high-speed environment also requires a very risk-prone and adventurous investment attitude, knowing that much of what you're building today will most likely be obsolete in 6 or 8 months, if not less. So let me stop here and thank you for your generous time and attention over the past 45 minutes. And let's open it up to some questions in the chat.